Huzzah and well met to you mad architects and efficient manufacturers. And today, by request, we have a video about anvil replacers. And this came from longtime viewer Rahul, who asked for an anvil replacer or anvil swapper. And once I started looking into block swapping in general, we came up with quite a few things. And even more so, but most of what caused this video to be delayed is just deciding what needed to stay in and what needed to be cut. So it seems there will be a part 2 to this with much more complex block swappers, but that will be for another time. We'll leave you with some basic stuff and some anvil replacers, just because that's what was requested. And before anybody asks, you cannot use a dispenser to replace an anvil or to place an anvil in general, and a crafter will not place one either. So we are stuck using a stack of anvils and the whims of gravity. But anyways, this is a very simple circuit that will just replace your broken anvil. That's all there is to it. We have a button that transfers power through our blue concrete block to a repeater, to a block, to another repeater, to a block, turning off a torch, which allows this sticky piston, to retract, pulling back our block that holds up all of our anvils. Our anvils fall and it pushes out the bottom one. This dark concrete block is just here to stop the anvils falling down, otherwise they will fall down before our sticky piston extends a second time, and you will push the second or third one. And if we do not use this block here, in fact, for the same reason, we'll make this one a dark gray concrete block. When our sticky piston retracts, it will pull this anvil backwards on top of this. And I'm not sure if that's a glitch or not. I don't think that they're supposed to work that way, but they do. And we're left with an anvil being placed up there, and I have not tested enough to see if they'll fall off the back or go over the redstone torch. We just put a blocker in place so that we get our anvil stack falls down by one, and then our piston pushes this forward. You can build around this so that you have an alcove where your workstation is replaced. And you can do that however you'd like. If you want the anvil to be outside of the wall, it still works while it's inside the wall there. But you get the idea. But perhaps that's not even good enough, and you would like for one that senses when to replace your own anvil. So I got this design, or at least the start of it, from Scott O'Mato on YouTube, and I will link that channel. The video was uh, quite a few years old at this point, and it didn't work as intended any longer, but I used some of their design to make one that does work as intended. So, with anvils, we have three different stages of deterioration. So you have an anvil, the fresh new one, or barely used. We have a chipped anvil, and then a damaged anvil, and then at the final stage is a broken anvil. So what we need to do is sense when when we get a new anvil, like so, when we have a chipped anvil, like that, when we get a damaged anvil, and then finally when our anvil is completely broken. Now, sometimes this will happen where it falls down and takes damage, and this will bungle the system somewhat. When your anvil still when your anvil breaks, you'll get a new one. So how to fix this, or how this thing works, we'll start with that, is our observer, observe our anvil being placed. We have a repeater, or excuse me, the signal goes through this block and powers our repeater and powers this dust, which powers off this torch. This torch is powering this block, which is powering all of this redstone, keeping these hoppers locked. These hoppers all point into each other, and in one of them here is a single item. We've used a dirt block, but it doesn't matter. You could use a diamond, you could use a netherite ingot, you could use a whole netherite block if you want. Whatever, it just needs to be one item. So, what happens is when our observer observes this and turns the torch off, it turns all of this redstone off, allowing just enough time for our item to advance one hopper. When it gets to this hopper, this comparator will detect that there is an item in the hopper and power this block and power this redstone, which will power this block and power off this torch, retracting our sticky piston for just a moment and then pushing our next anvil in. So, for consistency's sake, we're going to use that dark gray concrete block because its only purpose is to catch the anvils from falling further down. It will take long enough that you can lose all of your anvils as you're going along here. So we'll break, place, break to simulate the 3 stages of deterioration in our anvils. We have a brand new anvil, chipped, damaged, completely broken, new anvil, automatically replaced. If you intend to hide this, you need to keep this block clear, even though you'll be able to see the anvils. For some reason, the piston extension pushes the anvil, and the anvil thinks that it's in this block here, and this will break your system. Or your anvils won't fall properly. They'll turn into singular items or item entities and fall that way. Sometimes. It's bedrock, so it's tricky. So, in your world, test it out before you start using it regularly. But it is possible to hide this mostly. And once again, if you want to build out your floor so that your anvil is outside of the wall, that's fine, like we did earlier. You can build this alcove up. Well, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. It needs to stay on its observer. Whoops. Now we've broken the observer too. But yeah, because it needs the observer, we're unable to do that like we were the other one. So, my mistake. Now that's going to have thrown off our system before I demonstrate one last time. And when you start and build this one, you're going to want to place the dirt block right here before you place your first anvil. And then we have chipped, damaged, broken, replaced. Okay, so that makes for our anvils, or our anvil replacer models. Whoops. This will not currently be part of the other series I'm running where I've done the water stream videos, so you'll have to wait for that. But this ended up being too much fun to work with. So this is, I believe they usually call them super smelters, or using a furnace tape. But this works for a number of different blocks. I'm using these wool blocks because they're not part of our circuit, but we needed something to indicate what's been going on. So, use a button, and it rotates all the blocks. And then you can take and hide all but one so that it changes place. So, anyways, how does this work? These ones are really neat because we can take and expand them very much. But many times the examples I saw using this were like a crafting table, a furnace, a smoker, a blast furnace. And then you can, at least in Bedrock, have them all going even though they're being pushed around by pistons. So we get our button, sends a signal through our block to this redstone, activating this first piston. Then it follows this redstone to this repeater, which has 3 ticks of delay. Now, with repeaters, when you place them down, that's 1 tick, 2, 3 ticks. This signal travels on, gets our block here to activate this piston that pushes things up. So our blocks have been pushed to the side. Now one of them will be pushed up, the green one in this case. This also powers this blue concrete block, which shuts this torch off, pulling this piston back momentarily. And when it shuts off, it will push the blocks this way. Finally, we have this block being powered, and we have a repeater with 2 ticks of delay. Remember, when you set the repeater down, that's 1, and then 1 right click gives it 2 ticks of delay, which powers this block, which powers this, or depowers this torch, meaning that this piston stays retracted. You'll see when we push the button, that powers on for a moment to push the blocks down. This all happens in time, and I have, in many instances of cycling this machine, not seen it break at all. Sorry for the mouse snap there. It's very easy to expand. So right here at this gray block on this far end of the, or on this side of the repeater facing our block with a single torch, we can add another block, and that happens to be where this redstone dust is, and we can expand so that we have a longer tape, as it were. So in this one we have 6, still doing the same thing. You can expand this up to having a piston pushes 15 blocks before it can't push them anymore. So you could have 2 rows of 15, and that's where you get the super smelters that just have furnaces being constantly loaded. And if you're clever, you could run a hopper line inside of this blue wool here, or into this blue wool for fuel, and then all you would have to do is place your things inside from the front and leave this blue wool as your only exposed furnace. But that's really how simple this is. You see, we've just used this line. If you go for the much longer version and have 15 furnaces, get yourself more repeaters and don't add any more delay on them, because the timing is all set by these 2. And this one is off time. Don't know why. But the circuit is exactly the same, other than expanding how far our 2 sets of pistons are from each other. So next we have this block swapper, and this is the type that many people use to hide a staircase or keep a hidden staircase even with the ground. So with a simple switch, we can switch between our green wool and our orange wool. This one is a bit more complex, but how it begins is by the White Sun Paladin doing this wrong to begin with. This should be a blue concrete block, and I'm not going to knock it out of there and replace it lest I break the whole machine. So this gray block where our lever is should be blue concrete for our circuit here. So what we have is this torch. All right, well, if it's going to be like that. Okay, so this block either has power or does not because of our lever. When it has power, like right now, it turns this torch off, which turns this repeater off, which, well, this should also be a blue block. My goodness, I am slacking. Okay, This repeater has 2 ticks of delay, and it powers this block, which depowers this torch when it turns on, which means this piston is allowed to retract or it extends. We're having the opposite effect on this side. This torch will be powered on, which will power this block, which will extend this piston. So we have this going back and forth. We also have down here, when this blue block is unpowered, as it currently is, this torch stays lit, powering this redstone, powering this repeater, powering this block, which extends our sticky piston. These two to the sides are regular pistons because they're just pushing the block back and forth between themselves. This one has to be able to pull the block back down. So it's a sticky piston. We have a delay set in here so that our sticky piston retracts, our lateral pistons are able to switch blocks, and then the sticky piston is powered from the other side. This has you'll see that our power is coming from this torch here, powering this redstone dust, which travels down here to this repeater and powers uh, the blue concrete block under the sticky piston. So for a moment, it retracts. These switch, it extends again. these are these are being powered by this redstone dust through this block as well. And I have made so many errors tonight. Goodness. And these are powering back here to power this torch off again. This all has to do with the timing. So you technically have an on and off lever, but that is used to switch between two states. So you can build a floor around where your block pops up here. And like I said, this is generally used more for hiding staircases, but you could hide an enchantment table and a crafting table beneath if you'd like, or whatever you'd like to do. And finally, we have one that does a similar block swapping. This one has 3 different blocks that can be swapped into a wall, so you have something almost entirely hidden depending on where you put the switch, or the button, as it were. So we have a green block, and a purple wool block, and gray glass, because this would be your wall material, so you would have one matching and it's completely hidden. So how this works is we send a signal through this blue concrete into the redstone dust. This immediately powers a sticky piston on this side and a regular piston on this side. From the back, we're going to have the redstone dust is going to power this blue concrete block, which is going to do a couple of things. It's going to turn this redstone torch off, which is going to retract this piston, bringing the block that's currently there, the green wool, back so that it can be swapped. We'll start from this side with the slower delay. This is 2 ticks of delay, which powers this block, powering this redstone, powering this block, which powers our piston. Since this piston was already powered first, this one will push the purple wool into place and push the green wool over here. We will finally get these 4 ticks of delay to power this block and power this piston. This piston already being powered will now have the green block on top of it and pull it back down before this piston fires, pushing it back, pushing our green wool back to where our gray glass is right now. The gray glass represents the wall material that will be hidden. And you'll have to cycle it a few different times to get back. This is very similar to the tapes, except one pushes out. So, all of that is for some very basic block swappers, which seems like a great deal of complication in Redstone, and it only gets more intense from here. So, I want to thank you. A I had a new spate of subscribers. I very much appreciate all that you guys have done. I appreciate your comments and your likes. I enjoy these very much, and I really appreciate the suggestion to make a block swapper or anvil swapper. It's turned out to be very informative. There will be more in the future, and I hope you are blessed on your next quest while I'm off to my next adventure.